Welcome back to Beautiful Work, Beautiful Life podcast with Laurel Holland and Laurel Boyven. Boyven. I always want to change your name around, Laurel. I'm sorry.
That's okay. At least you know my first name.
I love it. I love it. I am so excited for our podcast today because we are talking about a really big topic, self-trust. And I don't know about you, Laurel, but I have clients that I work on all the time, the issue of the big T word, trust. And it always cycles back to self-trust, doesn't it?
It does. Trust is such an incredible part of our life. And sometimes we work so hard to keep ourselves safe that we don't trust
Mm.
ourselves or other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, especially, as we're going forward in the world today and the changes that are going on in the world today, people are feeling less safe, more anxious. And so this topic of trust and self-trust is really critical for, anyone's ability to really develop a life that they're going to feel good in and enjoy in the bigger picture, right?
I agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So let's talk a little bit about maybe we could just do an off the cuff, a little defining the word trust, even. Like, what comes up for you, Laurel, when you think about just the word trust itself as we explore it in a kind of definition way for our listeners to begin to set the tone and set a foundation for our discussion? Yeah.
Yeah, I think of trust as safety, security, um, maybe dependability.
Hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Those words come up for me. And the word that's for some reason like really ringing in my mind and my heart today is trust. Feels like it's part of our belief system. It's like trust ultimately is a belief in life, in self, in others, in the bigger, grander picture, in a higher power. There's kind of this bedrock of belief that comes in around trust. And so it's tied to our mental process, but it's a very emotional feeling experience, the experience of trust. Yeah.
Yeah, and as you say that, I was thinking about faith. Do trust and faith go hand in hand?
Yeah.
That whether we are talking about trust in ourselves or trust in other people, and faith in ourselves and faith in other people. And then, my favorite is trusting the universe and
Mm.
having faith that the universe has your back.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say for our listeners, as we begin this discussion and you're beginning to explore this topic for yourself, and of course we'd love to hear your thoughts on it, um, is maybe we can even start top down a little bit with the idea of, do you have a bigger faith and trust in life, in a higher power, in the universe as we know it or experience it for ourselves? Like, when we begin there, it's sometimes almost, it's weird, it's almost like the opposite, um an upside down equation, right? Where the foundation almost feels like it should be up here rather than down here. Are you
It's
following me?
true. I think so. What came to mind is you're kind of outlining the foundation,
Yeah.
and where the higher level trust is.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's easier to trust at the bottom because that's the concreteness, right? When
Right.
you think about trusting that your bank is going to be a safe place to put your money, that's easy to trust.
Right.
Or that your car is going to start in the morning.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
Trusting that the universe has your back is not always easy.
I know. I know. Trusting that the sun will come up, that the moon is going to shine in the sky at night, on, 27 nights of the year, whatever, like, yeah, it's so true. The concrete, is what we kind of hold on to, right? But when we're in deep trouble or we're really struggling with life, it's the big trust that we're looking for. It's the big faith that we want. And I love this topic. I love to dabble and talk about this topic for myself because being someone who is, I think, unusual in the world in that I wasn't brought up in a faith or a religion. I was left to find my own. there was a moment in my development, probably in my 20s, late 20s into my 30s, where I felt a little at a loss. I really began to proactively develop some sort of faith in a greater, higher power, universal organization, that kind of stuff, because it wasn't given to me. And one of the benefits was that was I got to develop something that I truly believed in, and I didn't have to question what was delivered to me. And I think that that's often what comes up with clients for me is people are questioning what they've been told that they're supposed to believe, and they might not really believe it.
Yeah, and that is so interesting because what I'm hearing you say is you were able to develop this trust
Mm,
based on your inner knowing, your intuition, what felt right for you.
yeah. Yes.
Rather than, those of us who were raised in a particular religion, or even, a church community, we're told what to trust. It's a very external amount of information coming to us that we are expected to trust in.
Right. 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 And build a
And
foundation. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think it doesn't have to be, I mean, we've talked a little bit about trust and faith, and kind of that more of a spiritual nature of those words.
Mhm.
But when you think about any, system, any community,
Yeah.
where you have trust within a family,
Mhm.
trust within, a classroom setting, or trust within a business organization, right? There's plenty of places that we're told what what to believe and what to trust,
Right.
and not allowed to let ourselves figure it out
Yeah, and
and
make it.
make the decision.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad we got there together. I feel like one of the struggles that I think many of us are facing today is as we are watching some of our systems that have been such a foundation of our life become dismantled, change, be threatened, self implode, whatever they're doing, that we wonder what can we trust? What is there to trust right now? And that's where self trust really starts to get to be the important topic, right?
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Often I talk with clients about um, creating a home in your inner being, which is the place where you're safe and you can trust in that space. And I really believe that if we have that sense of home and safety in ourselves, and there lies the self-trust,
Yeah.
we're safe anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
I
can bring that with us.
so with you with that. And I know personally my I call it my inner sanctuary was developed through the process of sitting with myself every day in meditation and self-reflection, in journaling time, in writing letters that needed to be written but never got sent, like in spending the time with myself privately to really and this is the inner journey, right, to do that inner work, where I started to create that space within that I kept returning to, that became and grew into this beautiful sanctuary internally.
Mm,
Yeah.
that is beautiful. Um, and I think in addition to the inner work and the inner sanctuary, the all of the tools that you just mentioned, there's one external that I works really well for me, and it's that holding myself accountable, right? Sometimes for me, self-trust is nothing more than doing what I say I'm going to do.
That
Um,
bing, 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 bing. Like I'm gonna just do bells and whistles right now, and especially for anybody's listening, because that to me, that was the biggest point that we needed to make today, ultimately. You know, that's
and
how
it's hard. It's
I
so hard. It's
are.
easy. It's easy to keep your word when other people are depending on you.
Yeah.
When you want to be known as honest and trustworthy and all of those external validation things that we want.
Yeah.
And it's easy to not hold ourselves to that same standard, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So self-trust is a big one.
It's a big one. And that idea of spending time in self-reflection, I feel like, for me, it was about doing the review of my life, of my choices, of my day as I became consistent with my practice to look at, did I behave, aligned with my values? Did I show up the way I wanted to show up? Can I trust myself to be actually who I say that I am and believe that I am? Am I actually doing that? And where are the places where I'm having a hard time doing that? Because we do. I mean, we've all been groomed to be a certain way in the world to succeed, whatever our definitions of that may be or may have been told to be, right? And so this idea of really looking at, our own definitions of that and starting to really look deeply at how this all lines up is a practice that over time you flush out. It doesn't happen just in a quick journaling session, right?
If only it did. So what other practices, how do you develop that? How do you act in a way consistently that you learn to trust yourself?
Yeah.
Any tips and tricks?
I think first and foremost is being compassionate when I'm not doing it exactly the way that I want to do it. Because what I've learned about change over time has been that I don't usually make the big leap quickly. I do it in stages. So, for instance, if I say I don't want to be, shutting down with my husband when he starts talking about financial stuff, well, I have to look at all those issues that surround that. Why am I uncomfortable talking about money? Why do I shut down when the topic is hard? How do I start to break down all of those pieces and begin to work with them each individually, right? And that's big work. That's not like just a quick change that you make necessarily. And it takes time to sort that all out and grow your confidence, change what's been in there as a belief that maybe you don't really believe in. Like my parents always were conflicted about money. It was always an argument in my house. So why do I shut down when the money topic comes up? Because that's what I did at home, because I didn't want them to fight. So it's like, so that's obvious, but how do I stop that? How do I
Yeah.
grow into the space of doing it differently? And so just giving myself a break. If I don't do it well or I don't say it well the first time, knowing I've got good intentions, go back, apologize, do it again, try again, and just keep fine tuning. I think that was one of the things I learned from Tai Chi was it was always a refinement process. You learn the form and then you just kept doing it and doing it and doing it until you worked out that little kink and changed your foot position that way and relaxed your shoulder over there and deepened your breath over here. So I see it all as a work in progress that way.
Oh, that is so good. And especially, you referred to self-trust as a practice, right? And even before you brought up the Tai Chi, I was thinking about when I learned to paddleboard. I was determined to learn how to do it. I was so uncomfortable. And on the ocean, I got up and fell down and got up and fell down and got up and fell down and got up and fell down at least 15 times, and it took me longer to climb back on the board than it did. It was longer to climb back on the board than the amount of time I stood on the board, but I kept getting back up and trying it again. And self-trust is like that. I this year in particular, I'm a recovering perfectionist, I'll say. And so I'm trying out the 80-20 rule, right? And so am I being who I want to be? Am I doing the things I tell myself I'm going to do 80% of the time?
Yeah.
And I tie that 80-20 with my rule of respect for yourself and others at all times, right?
Yeah.
And so, 20% of the time, maybe I'm not doing 100% of what I said I was going to do, but as long as it's not disrespecting myself and other people, there's some wiggle room in there to be less than perfect.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that that's that self-compassion and the grace, grace with ourselves. We can be so hard on ourselves around this topic. And
Mm,
yet there's something to be said for that, because I think that, it's almost like there's an embedded desire in there for us to really grow into a place of true self-trust and self-love.
mm,
So, when we're hard with ourselves, there's the goodness in that is that we keep we keep trying, to do better, to grow, to evolve, to change, to align the way we're talking about. And yet in that we can also do self-compassion and do grace and give ourselves kind words, and rather than that critical self-talk that we often get stuck in. Yeah.
yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because I do think that um, the self criticism and you know um, self criticism when we may not be doing our best or we may not be following through with something we said we were going to do to our with ourselves for ourselves, that self criticism I think it is the beginning of not being able to trust yourself, right?
Yes. Yeah.
um, and I think if we're too critical on ourselves, then we don't try, we don't promise ourselves anything, we just give up.
Yeah.
And in not promising ourselves anything, we really don't stand a chance of being our best self.
Yeah. Or having the life that we really want to have.
Yeah,
I mean, this is how it all ties together. And
yeah.
I know, so, I think of self criticism as, well, any criticism. And this was one of the things I felt like I really got in and came to believe as part of the group process that I was in was criticism doesn't serve anybody. There's ways to give feedback and there's ways to evaluate, your actual performance, but the critical voice really only, like you said, becomes the judging voice that we all want to turn away from. We don't want to hear, and it hurts. It's very painful, and it's hard to trust the judging voice, the critical voice.
Mm.
A loving voice of, wow, is that really what you meant to do? Is way different than, oh my God, did you really do that? I mean, those two things feel very different. One you can listen to and buy into and start to look at. The other one is like, oh, I just need to hide or whatever, right?
Absolutely.
Or fight back.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
um, it's so interesting. And developing self-trust I think is also at maybe the core of developing trust with other people.
absolutely.
Like,
I'm glad you.
I often find if I'm not trusting myself, I have a really hard time trusting other people. Um,
I,
and if I can't depend on myself,
yeah.
I can't depend on other people. It's very much a cycle.
Yeah. The way I came to understand it for myself is if I trust myself, then I'm trusting myself to put the people in my life in the right place in relationship to them. So if I trust my own judgment and I trust myself to make a good judgment, then I know I can trust that other person to the degree that is appropriate, right? And
Yeah.
that's why the self-trust to me is so important, because then if you trust your own decisions, then you can look over there and say, wow, if that person isn't very trustworthy, then they're not in my inner circle. That and you're okay that they're not trustworthy, because they're not going to really impact your life that way. And yeah, so that it's always this kind of refinement of looking at those relationships. And and I think it's critical too, like if you're in a relationship with a primary, your significant other, and you have trust issues with them, those two things of self-trust and trust with your partner have to be looked at together. They really do. It's really, you're going to have a hard time, I think, working out a trusting bedrock good foundation in that relationship without the self-trust, even if you come to trust the other person, if you don't trust yourself. So they really have to go hand in hand.
They do. And I've seen it show up surprisingly in my corporate career, my former corporate career. You know, the things I maybe distrusted most about a particular person were things I judged myself to be my shortcomings, where I couldn't trust myself. And
Yeah.
so, oftentimes now I can look back on it and think about it being a mirror. It was a messenger, a mirror for me to see inside of my own being of where was my weak spot in my trust with myself.
Yeah.
um, and why did I have such a hard time trusting another individual on a particular thing? Because I didn't trust myself in that thing. So if I, as you were saying, it shows up in a marriage, in a partnership, and I've seen it show up in work as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's so important. There's a book and I can't think of the title, but I'll put it in the notes when we're done. I was in a wonderful networking lunch group, and a woman actually wrote a book about something like, um, bringing your family relationships to work, playing them out at work. And she really dove into this topic about how whatever conflict you had at home and hadn't resolved, you're going to play out in the workplace, and how they actually mirror each other. So I feel like that might be helpful for our listeners, to take a look at. I did get it. I haven't read it yet, so I will. Well, we'll speak to that again as we.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So self trust, such a big topic. I feel like we talked a little bit about trust and respect and how they kind of go hand in hand. And I think one of the points that I know I wanted to make on that topic was, if you feel like you don't respect someone, you can still have a level of trust with them. And this is interesting because it's almost like you have a trust in the lack of respect, or a trust in the lack of what you want from them or how you expect them to show up. And so it's an interesting, um, and that goes in, and the reason I'm bringing it up is because it goes into that self-trust. It's like, if you are looking at somebody and you're like, I don't respect them wholly and fully, it's okay not to trust them and to put them out in that outer tier, no matter who they are. I think this is where we get kind of, confused, or we doubt ourselves. Is, you can have a real strong feeling that you don't trust somebody or you don't respect them, and they might be somebody that you've been told you should, or they're in a position of power, or they're in a position of authority, and yet you, for whatever reason, have that strong feeling. And so I think that's how we begin to develop self-trust, is to be okay with the feeling that we have and let that play itself out in the relationship. Keep people at a distance if that's what feels right for us.
Yeah, and I mean, that reminds me of how when you decided, um, what to believe in, what faith, what trust. um, it was your intuition, it was your self-knowing, and that's so important to use that and trust that,
Mhm.
as we are given information and objects, that we're told we should trust,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, because we get to decide.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that you're right. That's how we develop our self-trust,
Yeah. It's
by
become,
trusting our intuition and
yeah.
trusting our choices.
Yep. 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 That whole idea of being self-referencing, referring to self, that inner self of, what do I feel here? What do I believe here? What feels right for me? And having that come first and foremost. And we're not groomed to be that way, mostly.
We are not. And it just made me think about, you know, when we started talking about faith, faith is often a trust without an explanation, right? We don't need to know why, we just do trust. And so I think we can use that with our own self intuition, our self reference, where we don't need to understand why we have a feeling or a distrust of someone else.
Yeah.
As long as we respect that we feel it, and that be enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
Yeah.
that. I love how we kind of cycled back to came full circle coming back to faith, developing that faith and trust in self. And you know, I think broadly what happens when we do that is we do begin to it starts to widen out, and we start to get that stronger trust in higher power, in the way the universe is organizing. And so this work of developing a strong self-trust and doing the self-reflection work that's required to get your behavior in alignment and all that is so worth it, because it creates this bigger picture of trust that really holds our life in such, I think, beauty and grace ultimately. Yeah.
Mm.
Mm,
And it's connected to so many things.
yeah.
It's connected to our self-worth.
Yeah.
It's connected to our ability to set boundaries.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Re-
all of those things.
Relax, let go,
Yeah.
surrender, right?
Yeah.
So many things.
Yeah.
So, Laura, let's leave our listeners, like we usually do, with maybe some prompts for an exercise or journaling question to think on. Yeah, what's coming up for you around self trust for our listeners?
Well, the first thing that came to mind was not an exercise, but just an affirmation
Mm,
that, you know, you, we all,
mm,
w- you know, I am worthy of trust from myself, from others, and I'm capable of trusting others, myself, the universe. Right. So maybe the affirmation, and then in maybe a practice, maybe, you know, even if it was at the end of the day, oftentimes I do my 3 wins every day.
mm,
Maybe the three little things that I did today that are demonstrative of trusting myself. How
good.
did I show up?
Good, good. That's beautiful. I'm gonna jump off of yours, Laurel, because I loved your idea of an affirmation. So
Mm,
I would encourage our listeners to find an affirmation. It can be as simple as "I trust myself," and um, and then use that as a journaling prompt to um, write down the affirmation, and then sit and where do you feel it in your body? Do you feel it in your body? Begin to feel like, do I really believe whatever that affirmation is? Like, you gave a couple examples in your affirmation that were ideas of how to say an affirmation around trust and trusting life, and play with those. Like, do you trust yourself? If you don't, and you don't feel it, where are you feeling it? Does your heart rejecting that? What thought comes up around that? um, what dialogue starts to play out in your mind? And just take time to begin to write it down, because this is how we can uncover some of our beliefs around trust or our worthiness that we need to really work with and grow and change in order to build that sense of self-trust. So I think that we've given some great, rich
mm,
starters for people out there to begin to really delve into this topic. And I just want to encourage everybody to keep working on it and keep working on it, because boy, oh boy, building self-trust is a game changer when it comes to really feeling confident. I think that's probably one of the biggest things for me, when I think about self trust, how it can really impact your confidence wholeheartedly.
yeah.
Yeah.
And competence,
Yeah.
right? And then the other thing I would encourage our listeners is as you develop self-trust, so developing self-trust is a forward action.
Mm.
Let go of whatever action you took yesterday
Mm.
or last year or 10 years ago
Yeah.
that you still hold on to as proof that you cannot trust yourself.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Mm,
I thank you for anyone who's listening out there. If you're standing there being critical and judging, and really, how can you let go and give yourself some grace and do some forgiveness work that goes hand in hand. Another great topic for our podcast, Laurel, forgiveness work.
It was a good one. Made me think a lot of about a lot of things, and I can't wait to use some journal prompts for myself. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Okay, Laurel, we'll wrap it up for today and I'll see you next time.
Okay. Have a good day.
Bye, listeners.